Hello, so today we're here to sort of explain, perhaps, might be a little bit uninteresting, however, a subject matter that seems to come up an awful lot, whether you are in the shop or out on a shoot or something like that, is what makes a good game cartridge? What is a good game cartridge? What is the difference between game cartridges? Why do some cost so much? Game cartridges explained. There you go, there's a good title for this video. So we've got a little selection out, obviously we sell a lot more, and I'm going to try and explain why some cost 400, why some cost 200, 1,000, why some kill better, why some don't, what's inside them, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we've got a little selection in front of us here, just to try and sort of put some popular ones out, I suppose. We're going to talk about how they look for starters. Firstly, colour really doesn't have much bearing nowadays. It used to be that 12 balls were mostly red, now, and you know, 20 balls were yellow. However, nowadays, they can be whatever bloody colour they like. But we've got blue, black, purple, green, blue and grey. You know, there's all manner of colour of cartridges, so it's not something that actually really particularly matters. The length is something that we should be paying attention to. We have a 65, we have 67, and we have a... Oh Christ, that's actually that's 67, but this is a rolled turnover. And we do have a 70 there in the black gold dark storm. These are obviously different for chamber sizes. 65mm won't, 70mm won't fit in a 65mm chamber. Most modern guns are 70mm chambers. Matching the cartridge to your chamber size, I believe, I've been told by someone who should know, it does make a difference. I have pattern tested a lot of guns with customers, for myself, played with a lot of cartridges, and I found that it really made absolutely no difference to the pattern or the killing capacity, as long as you're using an appropriate one that actually fits. So you can fit a 65 in a 70, you can fit a 67 in a 70, and a 70 in a 70. In fact, you can fit 67s in a lot of 65s in 2.5 inch cases. So be careful what you pick. Obviously, if you've got a 65mm gun, don't put anything else in there. Brass. It's not brass anymore, as you might notice. It's silver with a brass coating. It's not actually silver, it's some non-ferrous but ferrous metal, seeing as they do seem to rust. I should probably ask, I would presume it is something. However, the length is still called the brass. Isn't that exciting? The length between this one and this one, as you can see, is quite disparate. You'll find cases with a longer brass eject slightly better, will hold the actual pressure a little better, and you end up with just a nicer quality cartridge. But mostly it is all to do with ejection, and some guns when they get hot can get fussy. Plus, my honest opinion of it, more than anything, if you look at the one in the middle, it's the ugly one. Long brass makes for a nice looking cartridge regardless of the actual quality that it ensues. We touched briefly on it earlier. You have two different types, rolled turnover and crimps. Rolled turnover you can fit a little bit more lead in. Crimps, you can't. That's about as interesting. They generally put rolled turnover on larger cases, slightly higher quality cases perhaps. Mostly because rolled turnovers are easier to reload, so those who home load or want to reload good quality cases use rolled turnovers. A rolled turnover used to be the way, but now everything more or less is crimped. Actual benefits of each, fairly minimal. I am told rolled turnover are better, and I tend to agree. However, again, on the pattern plate where it all counts, there's probably not that much difference. Alright. What is inside one? Let's cut one open and find out. So, as you can see, this is shot. It's 30 grams of 6 shot. Isn't it exciting? This is what flies out at the end of your gun when it comes out. And that's what kills your birds in a big pattern. Isn't that nice? So, that's the crimp taken off. Next, if we cut it about there, we have the next component on the list. the wad. As you saw, that disappeared. However, here's a small section of it. Probably going to kill myself here, and it's going to be mildly entertaining for everybody. There you go. There is your wad. This is what they call a fibre wad or a felt wad. Game Boy do a wool wad. They smell funny when you shoot them. Plastic wads, we might open up a plastic wad if I've got one here. Let's have a quick look. I do have a plastic wad. So we'll open up a plastic wad in a second just for a look. So your shot goes in front, there you go, still a few little balls of shot, let's put those there. Shot goes in front, the end, the shot, the wad. Behind the wad, most importantly, powder. That's what makes it go bang. There's a lot of varieties of powder. There's quite a few manufacturers of powder. Those who reload rifle ammunition, and some people who do reload shotgun ammunition, will understand the importance of powder. The coarseness, the texture, the components all make a very big difference. Some powders burn very quickly. They generally slap you a bit. Some powders burn a little slower, and that's why you end up with a slightly slower cartridge perhaps. That said, that can all be down to the load of powder. If you're, trying to shoot 64 grams of AAA or 64 grams of lead, you're going to need a lot of powder to get it up to 1400 feet per second. If you're shooting a 28 gram load, an ounce, you don't really need a lot. So that will obviously affect as a component. It's not something I know a massive amount about, however we might do a little video on it. Powder is important, and as I say, can make a lot of difference. Finally, your brass and your primer. What happens is the firing pin hits this, the primer goes bang, that ignites this pushes this, which pushes this out the end of this and out the end of your gun. So that's what's inside a cartridge. Perhaps that's not the most interesting thing in the world for those who already know. However, it's always important to have a reminder of what we're using to, well, I suppose I was going to use the word hunt then, to take our quarry. We're not hunting our quarry, there's got no horses involved, it's guns. And here, just for your wonderful information, what I'm going to use is this knife. Wonderful Leathermans. I should do a review on one. Right, so we have the fibre wad, which looks like that. This is a very important conversation actually about wadding. Well, it's a quick one. That is a 6-shot, and that is a AAA. This is what you use for geese, foxes, big stuff you really, really want to die. The first thing you'll notice about this is you have a little cup on the end, the shot cup. These are connected together by little plastics. When it comes out the end of the weld, these split like this, and the wad slows down, releasing the shot. Whereas the fibre wad travels up the barrel and pushes the shot straight out the end. People will say, and it is true, a plastic wad will give you more consistency. This is true. It will also give you more efficiency in speed. This is also true. A plastic wad has, obviously, they're all very complex. This is not what they all look like. This is just what some look like. They all have their own design. Will compress, as you can see. So you end up with slightly better recoil, more efficiency, slightly better barrel seal, but most importantly, they retain the shot, even if it is just for a yard, half a yard, a couple of yards. Some of them, some Italian cartridges are actually sealed, so you get these immensely pile driver type of patterns. Plastic wad, fibre wad. The reason we don't all use plastic wad is because it's made of plastic. It doesn't rot, it doesn't decompose. Photoplastic wads do, they'll decompose within a year. Wool shot cups are the thing, like I say, Game Boy have brought out. However, a lot of shoots don't allow plastic wad, or else everybody would use them. I know a lot of people who do use them, and they are very, very good. I've used them on a number of occasions, and for most of my clay shooting I use plastic wad. They are just a more efficient load. More bang for your buck, I suppose, or less pain for your bang, I don't really know. However, being a lovely, conscious, friendly, environmental human being, fibre wads are the future of mankind, not going to rot Mother Earth or whatever. So, that's wads covered. Alright, next we'll move on to what it says on the top of a box. 12 bore. Obviously that is the calibre of your gun. 12, 20, 28, 16, 410, doesn't matter what you shoot, but today we will be focusing on 12 bore loads. Wad we've done, fibre or plastic. Cases, I should touch on that quickly. Cases mostly are made of plastic. Rolled varnish paper are an option, although they're very expensive and really are only built for older guns that don't eject the plastic. They are just a little luxury item, perhaps, that, you know, they're totally unnecessary, but it's one of those things in life that sometimes you put the super unleaded in your car because it's worth putting in your car. It's just a nice thing to have. Sometimes you buy the £10 bottle of wine instead of the £5 bottle of wine. Sometimes you just need to live it up. Buy some paper cases, they're nice. We've done case length, which leads us on to probably the most two important components of a cartridge: load and shot size. Loads. Get our little toys back here. We have a variety of loads here. Common loads for game shooting: 28 to 32 grams. That's 28 grams, 30 grams, and 32 grams. As we like to call it, an ounce and a 16th, an ounce and an eighth. We'll stick to grams though, because nobody really operates in ounces whilst game shooting anymore. Everyone has slowly moved over. A 28 gram load is obviously lighter than a 32 gram load. When we say a load, I'm talking the actual quantity and weight of shot. It's not the weight of the cartridge in entirety. Obviously you have plastic, brass, not brass, primer, wad, shot, powder, everything in there. So it's the weight of the shot. Positives and negatives. Cartridges, I should say, start for game shooting at 26 grams and go all the way up to monster grams. 64 grams for goose shooting. I know people who consistently shoot 36 and 38 gram loads at game. And some pheasants do warrant it. Obviously, the more shot you have, the heavier amount of shot you have, the more shot you have, the denser the pattern. So 28 gram cartridge through the choke at 30 yards per se is going to be a less dense pattern than a 40 gram. More lead, more pattern, denser pattern, more killing capacity. It's a fairly simple recipe in your head. Unfortunately, it is not too simple because, as I found out recently, I moved from a 30 to a 32 gram load. I didn't shoot quite so well. I don't think they killed quite so well. Actual load of cartridge affects speed. This is really important to remember. So, for example, we have this, we have this, we have this. These are three cartridges that we will use as a demo. This is a Black Gold Dark Storm 32 gram 4 wool wad. This is a Hull driven grouse. And this is Hull Sovereign Parkour. This is a 28 gram 6.5, this is a 30 gram 5.5, and this is a 32 gram 4. You'll find that the 32 gram 4 operates at just over 1400 feet per second. This is about 25 feet per second faster than this. Maybe a little more even, actually. I'm not entirely sure on the stats on these driven grouse. I haven't had a good look at them yet, and I haven't put any over a chrono myself. But it's by the by. I'm going to throw it away. This is 1400. This is 1600 feet per second. Your lead isn't affected that much by speed of cartridge, not massively anyway. Affected enough, but an old adage, speed kills. Faster cartridges also kill better because you get better penetration of your shot. So your perfectly small pattern can kill very, very well at slightly longer ranges because you get that one piece of shot pile driving into it as opposed to a lot of slow shot bouncing off of it. And not that they do, but you can hear clatter off of wings. You'll drop legs, you'll drop wings, and what is the point? However, these are brilliant cartridges, so I can't knock them. However, speed kills. So there is an advantage to having a lighter, faster cartridge. Whether you want a 30 gram or a 32 gram or 28 gram load is very, very dependent on where you want to shoot. I will say that some birds require a heavier shot size, a heavier load, a heavier amount of lead. More lead is good, and if you're shooting these sort of consistent 40 or 50 yard pheasants that most people can't even tickle, to be honest, you need more lead. You know, your gun pattern will not suffice at that distance. More lead is necessary. However, for most people who are quite contented shooting a 25-30 yard pheasant, you don't need 32 grams. You really don't. It's just unnecessary. It's just, you know, like saying, you know, why have you got your turbo chipped? You can only go. We've got your car chipped. You've already got 300 brake. Why do you need 500 brake? The reason is because bigger is better. That's kind of what we're taught, right? So it's not necessarily true. However, there is the fact for you. Lighter cartridges are faster. Heavier cartridges have more shot, hence more depth. So there is a perfect medium. It's obviously somewhere in between. Why 30 grams of 6 is so popular. All right. Shot size and shot. So we often get asked what the difference is in shot. We're going to focus mostly right now on size. To start with, this is a AAA. You don't really shoot game with this, as you can see. They're quite sizable lumps of lead, especially if you're going out and you shoot a partridge or a pigeon with them. If you hit it, it's going to die, which is great. We all like things dying nice and cleanly. However, what we also have to realise in this situation is a pattern full of these is going to be a fairly sparse pattern, so chances of actually hitting it are fairly minimal. So we'll leave those for the boys who shoot lots of geese and foxes, which leads us on to these. Just as a quick explanation, I'm going to throw that one away, so it's irrelevant. What we have here is some different cartridges, just to sort of show you the quick difference of what you have in each load and the difference between shot sizes. Just open that up there. Right. Here we have 9s, fairly standard snipe load. However, much more popular for skeet and clay shooting. Let's bring these BBs back, or AAAs, sorry, back into the fray. There you go. Just a quick comparison. Look how many you get, firstly, in a cartridge by comparison, just as a dribble. If you could fit these into those, you'd get, oh, in cross, you'd get 6 or 7 times the amount. Well, something just a little more normal. This is a 6 shot, as you can see by comparison to a little fingernail. They're quite a big ball by comparison to, say, the 9s here. However, you get an awful lot of them in a case by comparison. You know, you get a lot by case by comparison to the AAAs here. However, less than the 9s. However, imagine getting hit by that. Actual mass is probably twice as much as a 9. So this is good. It's what makes 6 quite so popular. Obvious, quick explanation of shot sizes. 7.5s, clay loads, 9s, clay loads really, but both of them you can use for snipe, close range pigeons, that sort of thing. 6s traditionally used for partridge and pheasant. 7s you can use for partridges certainly, and 7.5s. However, most people nowadays use something a little bit more hefty, shooting at much higher birds than ever were back then, certainly, back in the day. 5s generally more for pheasants than partridges. However, the real difference between a 6 and a 5 is not massive by any standard. 4s, something a little bit bigger for your super high pheasants perhaps. However, your pattern does decrease. The size of the ball helps it maintain a high velocity for longer. Isn't that exciting? Basic physics. I'm not very good at that, I'm afraid, but there's a little bit of research will let you know what these shot sizes are doing at different distances and what that gives you in actual punching power. 3s, 2s, really for geese, BBs, AAAs, this sort of thing, really for foxes and geese and that sort of thing. So this really leaves us with a choice between a 5 and a 6. The choice there is a big nothing. Some people will say that 5s hit harder, which they do, but some people say 6s kill better because of the denser pattern. You've got a better chance of killing stuff. You know, in reality, you'll have good days and bad days with one, and all you need is to have confidence in a cartridge. It should also be noted that a size 6 isn't just a size 6. Firstly, and this is not actually what I was going to say, but European sizes and American sizes are different to ours. So European 6 will actually be like a 5.5. It's a half a size bigger. Whether that actually affects the way it shoots or whether that's mostly in your head, it's up to you. However, it's worth noting, certainly. What I was actually going to say is that each piece of shot is different. A cheap cartridge is cheap because the lead is basic lead. What they put into it is something called antimony. This makes the lead hard and shiny. There's a lot of different types of cartridge, and the more antimony goes into them, generally the more expensive they are. This makes them harder, makes them hit harder, makes them penetrate better. Obviously, if you're shooting a pheasant in the breast, if you shoot it in the breast and it stops in the breast meat, it's going to fly on. I mean, there's no denying that. It might hurt it, it might come down, but it'll be a runner. If you shoot it and it goes through the breast, through the bone and into the heart and lung area, and it dies, it's dead. And that's as simple as that argument gets. Antimony isn't the only thing they put into lead, and there's always been a lot of different things they've tried over the years. This is actually the cartridge I use, or at least I've been using for these last couple of seasons. This is the hole-driven grouse, a name perhaps they shouldn't have given it. It put an awful lot of people off. As you can see, it's pretty. The shot is copper-coated, which makes it 13 times harder than just pure lead. This gives it great penetration. I've noticed with these that you don't end up with winged birds anymore. You shoot them, they die, which is kind of a very important thing. Plus, it's really pretty. Plus, it denotes which birds you've shot. Unfortunately, a few people in my syndicate now use them, and, well, I can't claim what birds are mine anymore, but that's by the by. These things don't last. The real reason I use them is because they are an ultimate killing load, because harder lead penetrates better, softer lead doesn't, which is why more expensive cartridges are better than cheaper cartridges. However, for your average 25-yard pheasant, this sort of thing, which to be fair, it's not a bad cartridge, it's a high pheasant extreme. However, it's been kicking around a little while. You've noticed the lead sort of oxidised a little bit. You wouldn't get that, for example, in the copper-coated shot. You might go a little bit green after a long time. Perhaps in Game Ball's diamond shot you might not get it, where they have quite such a high polished antimony content. They're really nice, pretty cartridge actually. There you go. Pick one you're happy with. I recommend these. However, everyone recommends their own thing. Try some different ones. So see the results, make sure you're happy. I've been out with cartridges sometimes and I've been pulling feathers left, right and centre. You're hitting them but it's just not doing the job. Pick a cartridge that kills consistently, that you can hit stuff with. Speed doesn't make that much of a difference, but obviously if you're used to a 1600 feet per second cartridge, as we have discussed, then moving on to a 1300 feet per second cartridge isn't going to do you any use in your shooting. In conclusion, the overriding thing of what I want to put across now is that you should not get too confused. Don't get too hung up in cartridge technology and sales bullshit, essentially. Once you find a cartridge that you like, buy a reputable-ish manufacturer so you've got some consistent supply. Don't go and buy Documented cartridges because they're on special offer down at Sportsman Gun Centre or something like that, where you'll buy 1,000, think they're the best thing in sliced bread, but they will never make another batch. Or another cheaper brand perhaps, where they will make a batch and the other batch won't be the same. So, reputable manufacturer, stick with it. Stick with it, you know. There's something maybe to be said for using a different cartridge for low hedge hopping partridge to your super high pheasants, but for the most part if you use a good quality, mid-range sort of cartridge, nothing too heavy, nothing too aggressive, you will kill every bird in the sky with it. Stick with it. That's the real thing. Stop chopping and changing between game cartridges, because that is what makes you an inconsistent shot. Going out with a bag and rattling around and picking out a rainbow's handful of cartridges, we've all done it. I do it. I'm as guilty as anyone else of doing it. It doesn't do your shooting any good. We all know that. Find a cartridge that you like that kills well. Shoot it for the rest of your life. The end.